Good morning, students. We are studying biomechanics of ankle and foot, and we have already studied the hind foot, the joints of the hind foot, the joints of the midfoot, and today we are going to study the joints of the forefoot. We are going to study three joints over here. If you can see, this will be the tarso-metatarsal joint, metatarsal phalangeal joint, and interphalangeal joint. Fine. So we will be going to study these three joints today. Fine. And we have already studied talocrural joint, subtalar joint, and transverse tarsal joint, which is made up of the talonavicular joint and calcaneocuboid joint. So we have already covered the four joints, and now we are going to cover the rest three joints. This is the first joint is which we are going to study today is tarso-metatarsal joints. Now you understand the tarsals here. Here the tarsals which we are talking about is the medial cuneiform, the intermediate cuneiform, the lateral cuneiform, and you can see this as a cuboid, and you can see the base of the five metatarsals. The base of the five metatarsals. You see the surface of these metatarsals are they are basically concave. They are concave, and the tarsals are basically convex. It is a plain variety of a synovial joint. Now let us see the articulations. The first tarso-metatarsal joint is formed between the medial cuneiform and the base of the first metatarsal. Now medial cuneiform and the base of the first metatarsal, if you can see, it is very broad. It is a quadrangular shape like structure is there. It is very broad. Because why so? Because it is going to take the weight of the whole body. So that is why you can see the structure. You can see this structure. These bones are really broad as compared to the other bones. You can see this bone is also very broad. The fifth as well as the first ray, if you can see, they are really broad because they are main structures which are going to take the weight bearing. So coming back to since it is a very important structure because of the weight bearing, so this is having a separate joint capsule. Now coming to the second one which is formed between the intermediate cuneiform and the base of the second metatarsals base. So it is formed between the two, and the third one is formed between the lateral cuneiform and the base of the third metatarsal. These two bones, these second and the third joint, the tarso-metatarsal joint, is having one capsule. It is also having one capsule. But if you see for yourself, it has been it is very hard to move this joint. Why so? Because it has been reinforced medially by the first tarso-metatarsal joint, and laterally it has got a very broad cuneiform. Fine, which is basically supporting the fourth and the fifth metatarsals. That is the fourth ray or the fourth tarso-metatarsal joint is formed between the cuboid and the fourth ray, and it is also the half of it is also been formed by the fifth. That is the head base of the fifth metatarsal base of the fifth metatarsal. So you can see these fourth and fifth one is having one capsule, the first one is having one capsule, and these two are having another capsule. So it is basically, you see that, you remember that navicular was not having any movement. It was having very less amount of movement. So they basically, the second ray, we will be studying this later on in the other in the next joint, that this is basically forming a part with the navicle, whereas the cuneiform is forming a part of the ray for the fourth and the fifth. Fine. So they all are having a separate kind of a joint capsule. The first is having separate, the second and third is having one capsule, and fourth and fifth is having another capsule. So you should remember this. It's a plain variety of a joint, and it is a variety is that it has having different joint capsules, and the mobility is also different because the mobility is there in the first and the fourth and fifth, whereas the intermediate, that is the intermediate and the lateral cuneiform is making it immobile, the second and the third ray. we will discuss it later on. Fine. Now if you see with that of the wrist joint, we have also studied the carpometacarpal joints. Yes, we have also studied this joint. So this is similar to those lines. It is similar to that of the carpometacarpal joints. So fine. So it is homologous to that. But it has got different, the weight bearing joint. It is basically a weight bearing joint. Remember that it is less of mobile, but herein you can see it was more of a mobile joint rather than a stable joint. But herein you see it is a more of a stability joint, because weight bearing is taking place and dissipation of forces need to be done, rather than it is a mobility joint. Fine. So if you can see this, then very important thing is the ligaments which is supporting it. So there is also a transverse metatarsal ligament which is holding it from here. Fine. Then there is there are plantar ligament is there, where that is which is holding. There are plantar plates, I will say. The plantar plates are there, similar to that of the volar plates. You remember? So there are also plantar plates are here at the base of the base. There are plantar surfaces are there. Then there is also been covered by the dorsal metatarsal or transverse tarsal ligament. Fine. So they have been supported by these ligaments and they have a joint capsule, so it allows the mobility. Let's go side by side see this slide also. Now you can see this slide is basically about the articulation. The articulation of the first medial TMJ joint is between the base of the first metatarsal and the medial cuneiform, which is having its own capsule. The second TMJ joint, it is formed between the base of the second metatarsal and with the middle cuneiform or intermediate cuneiform. Fine. And it is also been supported by the medial and lateral cuneiform bones. So it is restricted. This restricts its joint range of motion and it makes it more strong. Fine. The third metatarsal is metatarsal joint has been formed by the lateral cuneiform and the base of the third metatarsal, and you can see it shares the capsule with the second metatarsal. The fourth and the fifth metatarsals are bases of the fourth and the fifth metatarsal are joined with that of the cuboid bone, and this is having a separate joint capsule. Now I was talking about these ligaments, so you can see there are so many ligaments around. So there is interosseous ligament, there is dorsal ligaments, plantar ligaments, deep transverse metatarsal ligaments, which is basically holding the metatarsal head together. Fine. So these are the all ligaments which are there. And now let us see the axis. Now axis at which this movement takes place. To understand the axis, one should know what is a ray. Now we say ray is a functional unit which has been formed by, it is a functional unit. It is a functional unit which has been formed by the metatarsal and its associate cuneiform bone for the first through 3 rays. So what will be this ray? This is said to be the ray. You can understand the first ray is formed with the corresponding tarsal bone. You need to tell the tarsal bone over here. Like the first 3 rays will be formed with the metatarsal and the corresponding cuneiform. The fourth and the fifth ray is formed with the metatarsal and the cuboid bone. Fine. So you should remember this, that the motion of maximum motion which is taking place is in between the is oblique. It is basically oblique. The axis is basically oblique. Fine. I want to show it in this diagram. You can see the axis over here. The axis of the first ray, can you see that? And the axis of the fifth ray. Now you can see the axis of the first ray. It is passing through the through the navicular and part. You can see the navicular bone. The second you can see the middle or intermediate cuneiform, and then it is running through the base of the third ray and the base of the metatarsal head, and it is running obliquely to the fifth fifth metatarsal head. Can you see this? We will be discussing this in the next joint also, but you just keep just note this. Fine. So you can see it is navicular bone, the middle intermediate cuneiform, and then at the base of the metatarsal, third metatarsal head to the fifth metatarsal head. Now you can see for the fifth ray it is passing through the cuboid bone, and then again it is passing through the intermediate cuneiform, and then it is going to the base of the first metatarsal, and it is going to the, and it is crossing it. So this is the ratio, this is the oblique axis. Fine, this is the oblique axis we are talking about. Now that is why if there is an oblique axis through which this is running, if I can show you here, so around this the axis is taking place. Fine, this is the point, or this is the bone along which the axis is taking place, or the oblique axis runs. So because of this oblique nature, the first ray is having the large range of motion. That is, it allows the dorsiflexion also, it allows inversion, adduction, as well as plantar flexion, eversion and abduction. So these components are there. Whereas in the fifth ray, you can see it also allows the range of motion, but it is in opposite direction. Can you see the axis was different? It was this for the first ray and this for the fifth ray. So means the action, it is a triplanar kind of a motion, but the axis or motion is opposite to that of the first ray. Fine. So that is, dorsiflexion is accompanied by eversion and abduction, and plantar flexion is accompanied by inversion and adduction. You have to remember this because it is opposite. Dorsiflexion and plantar flexion are the same movement which are happening, but the dorsiflexion in first ray is accompanied by that of inversion movement and adduction movement, whereas plantar flexion was accompanied by eversion and abduction movement. Let me show you. Yes, this is dorsiflexion in first ray is accompanied by an inversion and adduction movement, and plantar flexion with eversion and abduction movement. Herein you can see the dorsiflexion is accompanied by the eversion and abduction movement, and plantar flexion is inversion and abduction movement. You just need to remember this because it is opposite, it is functioning opposite. Fine. And the third ray only one function, because it is almost in the third ray the axis is only coronal axis is, and the motion which is predominant is only dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So that means the motion will take place, the second ray is basically least mobile, and the fifth and the first ray is only the mobile rays which will decide the motion. We will discuss about the biomechanics of these joints together. Fine. And but let us go through the important part is what is the function. Now the function of tarsometatarsal joint is similar to that of carpometacarpal joints. Now it is basically, this was able to grab the things, it was able to collapse to grab different areas, or grab the stuff, or grasp for the hand. For the TMJ joint is very much important for flattening of the foot, so that we can walk on an uneven surface. So it is also important part of the weight bearing, as well as it is important part of flattening and hollowing of the foot according to the kind of uneven surface we are walking. Fine. So it plays a very crucial role it plays a very crucial role when the movement is being transmitted from the hind foot to the midfoot, and if the midfoot collapses, then the forefoot takes the action. So it plays a very crucial role in further maintenance of the base of the support. Fine. So basically what happens over here is, before I teach you this supination twist, I want that you should also know about this this is basically the next joint. Before I teach you, before I teach you the biomechanics of the forefoot as a whole, I want to cover up the other joint also. The other joint, it over here is metatarsophalangeal joint. Can you see? This is the metatarsophalangeal joint. We have got 5 metatarsophalangeal joints, and they are basically, if you can see, the head over here is convex and the base is concave. the head is convex and the base is concave. It is basically a condylar variety of a joint. Fine. And it allows, it is similar to that of this, the metacarpophalangeal joint. It is similar to that of this, but it is again different. Why so? Of the hand. Why so? Because this allows basically flexion movement is more as compared to extension. Herein these joint allows extension movement more as compared to flexion. This is a very important point. Fine. So this is basically one is this, that it allows flexion movement more, and this allows extension movement more. The second important point is, you can see that the thumb is basically helping in opposition here. Fine. Whereas in here it is lies in the same plane, so there is no opposition movement over here. So it is more over a weight bearing joint, and this is more over a mobility joint. So this is the difference which is there. So the motion over here is extension is more, it is more for the dissipation of forces, and the great toe is in the same plane as compared to the hand, which is in the different plane, so that it allows the opposition to takes place. Fine. So as I told you, it is a the convex surface is passing through the convex distal proximal articular surface to a concave base of the phalanx. It is, this is the joint, and it is 5 in number. Now let us see the first joint. This first joint, if you can see, this is the first joint. Now if this you can see along with this, it has got 2 sesamoid bones. We will be talking about the first metatarsophalangeal joint. It has been supported at over there as 2 sesamoid bones. These 2 sesamoid bones, if you can see for yourself, these 2 sesamoid bones, they act as a pulley. They act as a pulley, so that to increase the efficiency of basically the flexor, there is pollicis brevis. Fine. And it basically divides this tendon into 2 halves and allows the flexor hallucis longus to pass through it. So it basically acts as it divides the flexor pollicis brevis into 2 slips, and in between the flexor hallucis longus passes through. So it acts as a anatomical pulley, and it has got its own significance. This is a sesamoid bones, 2 sesamoid bones. Now there are clinical condition also associated to this, is that it is a major cause of because it allows the smooth running of or without any impingement of these 2 tendons. So what is happening is it takes the load. This is basically, if you can see the first, it is quadrangular, lest they are very small. But this is quadrangular. It has got a weight bearing structure. It is allowing, and this sesamoid bone is basically protecting this tendon when the joint takes part in weight bearing. So what is happening over here is that if this is weight bearing is too much, or if there is abnormal weight bearing is taking place because of the collapse of the foot or any other reason, it becomes tender. This area becomes tender. It becomes a painful foot. This condition is is called as sesamoiditis. That is, the sesamoid bones, there is an inflammation of these bones, and there is a pain over there, and if the weight bearing keep on continuing over there, then there is chances of avascular necrosis of the two sesamoid bones. So in that condition, the patient is having a crucial pain around the first this joint, and the patient says that it is too painful. We try to modify its shoes, and we try to go for a cold contrast, cold immersions, and if nothing, then we have to remove this this bone if it turns into a avascular necrosis. So it is, first is the clinical importance is this sesamoid bone. It is very important because it acts as an anatomical pulley, but it is a chances of getting is implication, if I can say, is that there is a chances of getting what is the sesamoiditis. The second condition over here is that we basically see is Morton finger. I want to show you is this. These are the rays as we have discussed. Now you can see the first ray should be all if it is larger than all the rays, then it is said to be an intrinsic plus foot. Fine. If the second ray, or if the first and the second ray, they are in the same line, then we say it as intrinsic plus and minus foot. Fine. Now, what is the reason why the first ray need to be long enough is because it is a weight bearing. The maximum 30% of the weight passes through it, and or I can say 48% of it passes through it, and 30% is transmitted to the other rays. So this need to be very much strong, and it is need to be proper foot. So it is always length. This ray is long. So the first ray is the intrinsic plus foot, and if these two are balanced together, then we say it both first and the second rays evenly distributing the weight. We say it as intrinsic plus and minus foot. The third condition is when the second ray in this foot, you can see the second ray is long as compared to the other rays. Now this is called as Morton foot, or this is called to as intrinsic minus foot. That is, in this condition what happens is that there is chances of getting the chances of getting dislocation or pain is very high. Fine. So this is called as Morton foot. Also the chances of getting the pain is very high. The third clinical condition is the fractures, which is called as fractures of this metatarsophalangeal joint. If there is a fractures, more than one fracture, we say it as Lisfranc fractures are there. That is, they are which will cause foot pain. So there can be three kind of a foot pain can be there. The reasons of the foot pain can be sesamoiditis, this can be a Morton foot, or this can be a Lisfranc fracture, and they can be just a hairline fracture. But if it happens in more than two metatarsals, then it is said to be a Lisfranc fracture. So this is the clinical implication of it. Now if we can see now this structure, then we have also got another important structure is the IP joint. So you understand, we have got only this one IP joint for the first toe, but there are two IP joints are there, and it allows only 1 degree of motion, that is flexion to extension kind of a movement which is there. Fine. So these are the motion which are there. It is formed with the head of the you can see the head of the middle phalanx to the base of the base of the middle phalanx to the head of the, you can say, the distal phalanx. So this is the joints which are there. We talked about tarsometatarsal joint, we talked about metatarsal phalangeal joint as well as the interphalangeal joints. Fine. So these are the joints which are there. Plain synovial joint, condylar variety of a joint, again we can say it is a plain variety of. Now if we see the structures which are, it has got joint capsules and it has got supporting structures. Now you understand that there is again similar to that of this hand, we had volar plates over here. So we are having plantar plates over here. Okay, we are having all these plantar plates over here. So these are basically functioning the same. We have got a plantar ligament, short and long plantar ligament. We have got dorsal interosseous ligaments and dorsal ligaments. We have got interphalangeal, transverse interphalangeal ligament also over here, similar to that of hand. And these ligaments, short and long, these all ligaments basically support the foot. It has also got plantar aponeurosis, which I will talk about it later on when I will study about, we will study about the plantar arches. But this plays a very important role in stabilizing the joint. Now let us see the function of these all joints as a whole. Fine. And this function is basically what is called as supination twist. Now we understand that it has got an oblique axis. We have studied this, that these rays are getting an oblique axis. The first ray is the center is the intermediate cuneiform. Fine. These axes are oblique in nature. So it brings about, yes, the dorsiflexion brings about in the first ray along with inversion and adduction, and the plantar flexion brings about abduction and eversion. Opposite happens in the fifth ray, because they are mostly, since their oblique axes are there, so they are most mobile. These rays, two rays are there. It is opposite to that of the first ray. That is, the dorsiflexion brings about abduction and eversion, and plantar flexion brings about adduction and inversion. It is opposite to the function of the first ray. Fine. The middle rays are least mobile, and it only brings about dorsi and plantar flexion. Fine, this need to be very much clear that because of the orientation of the axis. Now what happens over here is that if the hind foot, now let us see this mechanism. Now if the hind foot is pronated, fine, if the hind foot is pronated because it is the mobile position, if is going into pronation, then what will happen? If the hind foot is pronated, the midfoot, you remember that if hind foot is going into pronation and the midfoot will try to go to supinate, and will try to compensate the pronation which is happening at the hind foot. Now if the midfoot, that is transverse tarsal joint, is not able to complete the supination, then this kind of a force is transmitted to the forefoot. This force is transmitted to the forefoot. Just remember that, because the midfoot was basically transmitting or absorbing the force which was been produced by the hind foot. The hind foot, do you remember that the supination was a locking position and the pronation was a mobile position or a mobility position. So if the hind foot goes into pronation, now what is pronation? When the lateral surface of the foot is raised. Fine. If pronation will be like this, if this is the foot, pronation will be like this. The lateral surface of the foot is raised. When the lateral surface of the foot is raised, this is the foot, you can see the lateral surface of the foot is raised. This is called as, or the medial surface is touching the floor. This is called pronation. Now if the hind foot has gone into pronation and this supination is not properly done, or it is partial supination takes place at the transverse tarsal joint, then this force has been transmitted by the forefoot. The force will be transmitted to the forefoot, and forefoot will now complete the supination. Fine. Why we are doing the supination? Because to maintain the base of support, we want a wide base of support. So what will happen is, now this is supination, what will happen is it will bring about, you can see there will be, for supination to happen, there will be one dorsiflexion happening at the first ray. The dorsiflexion is bringing about adduction and inversion. The plantar, and in the fifth ray is bringing about the plantar flexion with adduction and inversion. Basically it is an adductional movement which is happening, inversion and adduction movement which is happening. Let us see this again. Try to raise, if you want to do it with me, try to raise your lateral side of your foot, and now imagine if the lateral side of the foot is raised, that is you are weight bearing on the medial side. Now what will happen to your great toe? Now great toe goes into dorsiflexion and adduction and inversion, and the fifth ray, the great toe or the first ray is going into dorsiflexion, adduction and inversion, and the opposite happens at the fifth ray. Do you remember that? We have already studied, because of the oblique orientation, oblique axis, opposite happens at the fifth ray. The fifth ray will go into plantar flexion with, there is adduction and inversion. Fine. So there is basically an inversion and adduction movement which is happening, which is called as supination twist. That is the supination twist or supination, or the weight bearing is of the foot. The foot is placed on the floor flat with the help of forefoot, which has gone into supination twist. Fine. Ideally the hind foot has gone into pronation. The tarsal joint, the transverse tarsal, should bring about the supination, but if it is not able to produce the supination properly or fully, then what will happen? This will be continued at the level of the forefoot, and it will cover up this position, or it will bring weight bearing to the foot. Again the foot will be flat on the ground. It was like this, and it will bring about this flattening of the joint, or foot will be flat on the ground and increasing the base of support, which is brought about by the first ray and the fifth ray, since they are mobile joint, and it will bring about the dorsiflexion of the first ray and plantar flexion of the fifth ray. So dorsiflexion of the first ray, the second and the third ray will only produce one movement, that is dorsi or plantar flexion. So herein they are producing, the first and the second ray will produce the movement of dorsiflexion, whereas the third, fourth, fifth ray is producing the movement of plantar flexion. Now what is pronation? Opposite happens in the pronation. Now if the hind foot goes into supination, now what will happen is, if it goes into supination, now the middle foot will, or the transverse joint will produce pronation, so that it is a locking position, so that movement need to be continued at the transverse tarsal joint. So if it goes into pronation. So if it goes into pronation, it is not able to produce full pronation. The pronation will be done by the forefoot. Now what is pronation? Now you bring your foot, medial surface of the foot should be raised. You can see, and the weight bearing is done on the lateral surface of the foot. Now look, this is the condition. So what will happen is again the foot will try to go for increase the base of support. Now it was very less base of support. It wants to increase the base of support so that we can stand and we have a stability. So what will happen is there will be a plantar flexion movement at what is happening at the first ray. So plantar flexion is brought about by abduction and eversion of the first ray, and it will be brought about by dorsiflexion and eversion and abduction by the fifth ray. So this is called as the pronation twist. This is called as the pronation twist. Fine. We will go through this PPT and revise this again. Now supination twist is when the hind foot pronates and in weight bearing, and the transverse tarsal joint generally supinates to some degree to counter rotate the forefoot and keep the plantar aspect of the foot in contact with the ground. If the range of transverse tarsal supination is not sufficient to meet the demands of the pronating hind foot, the medial forefoot will press into the ground and the lateral forefoot will tend to lift. Sorry. The first and the second ray will be pushed into dorsiflexion by the ground reaction force, and the muscle controlling the fourth and the fifth ray will cause plantar flexion at the TMJ joint in an attempt to maintain the contact with the ground. Both dorsiflexion of the first and the second ray and the plantar flexion of the fourth and the fifth ray is include the component of inversion of the rays. Consequently, the entire forefoot undergoes an inversion rotation, and this is called as the supination twist of the TMJ joint. You can see over here the movement which is seen, and you can see how this supination, if it is going extreme pronation is going at the subtalar joint, is accompanied by plantar flexion and adduction of the head of the talus and eversion of the calcaneum, along with the, you can see the forefoot is going into supination twist. Fine. Now what about the pronation twist? When both the hind foot and the transverse tarsal joint is locked in supination, the forefoot need to do the adjustment. The hind foot is supinated, the forefoot tends to lift off the ground on its medial side and pressing the ground on the lateral side. So the muscle controlling the first and the second ray will cause rays to plantar flex in order to maintain the contact with the ground, and the fourth and the fifth ray is forced into dorsiflexion by the ground reaction force. So therefore, because of this eversion component in both plantar flexion of the first, second ray and the dorsiflexion of the fourth and fifth ray, it is called as pronation twist. Fine. Now the moment you will be able to understand why there is a pronation twist. Fine. So all those two movements are basically for the compensation of the hind foot. The TMJ joint completes the weight bearing of the foot, and when it is insufficient, when the transverse tarsal joint is insufficient in compensating the hind foot, then only it comes into play. We have also seen now the metatarsophalangeal joint. Now it has got only one function. It has got 2 degrees of, since the condylar variety of a joint, condylite. So it has got only 2 functions, flexion and extension, and little bit of abduction and adduction. Now this abduction and adduction is the important one. The primary movement is flexion and extension, and mild degree of abduction and adduction takes place. Fine. Now if you see their axis, and you will find it is also the first ray is passing through the proximal phalanx, the head of the proximal phalanx. You can see this. They are passing through the head of the proximal phalanx. Now, the first ray, it has got 2 sesamoid bones. We have seen this on the plantar surface, and it has been supported by collateral ligaments. Now, this has also been supported by the collateral ligaments, the deep transverse metatarsal ligament, the collateral ligaments on both the side, medial and lateral side. It has got plantar arches as we had, and a joint capsule. We have already discussed this. So just going through these PPTs to make just revise. The MTP joint has got 2 degree of freedom, and flexion extension is more as compared to abduction and adduction. And herein you remember the extension is more as compared to flexion. We have discussed this when we were comparing the MTP with the carpometacarpal joint, and we were telling you that flexion is more in hand, whereas extension is more in foot. So this plays a very important role in during walking, when we are on when the heel is raised during walking, and when we are weight bearing on the MTP joint. In the gait cycle, we know that there is heel off phase and toe off phase. We are talking about that. When the heel off phase takes place, the weight bearing takes place on this joint. This is called as a metatarsophalangeal joint. So it takes a very crucial role over here. It brings about MTP extension. Herein MTP extension takes place. All the major weight is taken here, and it is transmitted from the second, third, fourth and fifth. Fine. So it is basically weight bearing takes place over here. Now if you see the axis, it has got again an oblique axis which is passing through the head. You can see the head of the metatarsophalangeal joint, and you can see this is making an angle with the longitudinal axis of the foot. Fine. The metatarsal break derives the name from the hinge or a break that occurs at the MTP joint when the heel rises, and the metatarsal heads and the toe remain in weight bearing. So the toes and when the heel raises, the toes and the MTPs are in weight bearing position. So metatarsal break occur when the MTP extension takes place through these oblique axis. Can you see this axis? This is the axis on which the weight bearing takes place. Can you see this is an oblique axis? From the second to the fifth, it is an oblique axis. Now inclination of the axis is produced by diminishing the length of the MTP, the metatarsals, from the second to the fifth. That is, the axis is inclining from the second to the, we saw that it was an oblique one. So the axis is maximum or it makes an angle of 54 to 73 degree from the longitudinal axis of the foot. The range of the first MTP joint is influenced more with dorsiflexion and plantar flexion movement, and it decreases with age, and it is limited in cases of if it is rigidity or OA knee or OA of arthritis of the MTP joint takes place. That is called as rigidus, limited movement. So this limited range of motion of dorsiflexion and plantar flexion will take place, and this movement is basically decreasing. It is more at the first and it is decreasing when it is moving away from the second, third, fourth and fifth. Fine. So what is happening here is the normal range of motion is, you can see over here, but it decreases in this range. Can you see? So what is metatarsal break we want to say is, now when the heel rises in weight bearing, there must be contraction of the plantar flexor, ankle plantar flexors, then only this heel raise takes place. And now the plantar flexion muscle normally cannot lift the heel completely unless the joint at the hind foot and the midfoot are supinated. So they need to be locked over here, then only this plantar flexors takes this position. So the plantar flexor musculature normally cannot lift the heel completely unless the joint of the hind foot and the midfoot are supinated and locked, so that the foot can become a rigid lever and the calcaneus, from the calcaneus through the metatarsal. Fine. So this rigid lever then rotates around the MTP axis. This rigid, it becomes a rigid lever because they are both are supinated. Hind foot is supinated and midfoot is supinated. So it becomes a rigid body, a rigid lever at the MTP joint. MTP joint. Now the MTP extension occurs. MTP head will glide posteriorly and in the plantar direction along with towards the plantar plates, and then they have been stabilized by all the ligaments and the phalanges. Now if the metatarsal heads and toes becomes the base of the support, then only the line of gravity must move and remain stable. In order if this happens, then only the line of gravity must move within this base to remain stable. The line of gravity passes through this base, the base which has been formed by the first MTP and the second, third and fourth, fifth. The oblique nature of this axis for the metatarsal break allows the weight to be distributed throughout these heads from the second to the fifth. Fine. So if metatarsal break occurs around this coronal MTP axis, an excessive amount of weight would be placed at the first and the second. But the oblique nature of the axis makes this brake shift laterally and minimizing the load at the first and the second digits. So this is what is happening over here. So the flexion of the range of motion at MTP joint occurs limited in neutral position, and most MTP flexion occurs as a result of neutral position from extension. There is an abduction to adduction movement also taking place, which is basically when the weight shifting is taking place. So MTP is going into extension as well as abduction in order to transmit the force from the second, because of its oblique nature, it is transmitting the force from the second metatarsal head to the fifth metatarsal heads, and this takes place in pronation and supination twist. Remember, we have done it at the tarsometatarsal joint. The supination and pronation twist was happening. So in order to complete the supination and pronation twist, the MTP also goes into a little bit of along with the flexion, and it is bringing about adduction, and it is bringing about abduction with extension movement. Fine. So what is this? You can see the ray. Wanted to show you what happens. And normal it is this the first ray will have 15 to 19 degree of adduction movement is taking place. Now, but it changes in cases of if there is hallux valgus. When you see, this is hallux valgus. An increase in this normal valgus angulation of the first MTP is referred to as hallux valgus and may be associated with varus angulation of the first metatarsal at the TMT joint. That is metatarsal varus hoga. So then there is a hallux valgus position will take place. Fine. So now what about the IP joint? The IP joint is I told you, a hinge variety of a synovial joint which have 1 degree of freedom, which is flexion to extension, and these IP joint plays a very crucial role in gait when the person is standing on toes, that is on heel of face. It plays a very crucial role. Fine. So these are the phalanges on which it moves. So in today's lecture we have done is the role of the forefoot. The role of the forefoot, that is the tarsometatarsal joint, the metatarsophalangeal joint and the IP joint. The tarsometatarsal joint is basically comes into play only when the mid-tarsal joint is not able to compensate for the pronation and the supination which is done at the hind foot. Fine. If it is not able to complete this, compensate for the movement at the hind foot, the midfoot is not able to compensate the movement at the hind foot, then only the forefoot come into play. Fine. So when the forefoot come into play, it brings about all the things to maintain the stability of the foot. The foot, either when it is supinated, it tries to maintain the base of the support and bringing about the pronation twist, and if it is pronated, hind foot is pronated, it brings about a supination twist. You can you saw that because of the oblique nature of the tarsometatarsal joint, the motion at the first ray is opposite to the motion of the fifth ray. That is there is an inversion and eversion rotation. That dorsiflexion was bringing about of the first ray brings about an inversion rotation, whereas the dorsiflexion of fifth ray brings about an eversion kind of a movement, which is bringing about a supination and pronation twist. Now what happens at the metatarsophalangeal joint? Metatarsophalangeal joints have got basically the function is flexion and extension. There is a metatarsal break which happens. What happens here is, in order to bring about this supination twist, it has been supported at MTP joint. The MTP joint, the first MTP joint comes into play only when the foot, the hind foot and the midfoot act as a lever. If the hind foot goes into supination, the midfoot also goes into supination. Then what happens is there is a pronation twist which happens at the forefoot and which is completed by the MTP joint. The MTP joint has got again an oblique axis. It runs like this. From it obliquely it runs, that is, it brings about, there is an extension motion is more as compared to the flexion motion. So the extension motion of the first and the second ray which takes place, and the dissipation of the force from the second to the fifth, the metatarsal, all the MTP joints goes into extension so that to bring about the center of gravity, the base on this base. So the base of support is like this. So it is called as metatarsal break. The MTP extension which takes place from the first to the second, third and fifth. It is in an oblique form, more towards the first and the second MTP, and then obliquely runs over there, so that it maintains the stability. Now what happens at the IP joint is it supports the MTP joints and bring about an extension movement along with a little bit of adduction and abduction movement. So the adduction movement at the first MTP at IP joint is almost, we can say, 15 to 18 degree, and with this is responsible for shifting off of the weight when the metatarsal break was taking place. Fine. I hope you have understood the role of hind foot, the midfoot and the forefoot in maintenance of stability and weight bearing of the foot. This plays a very crucial role. These all joints basically work together in synchrony to bring about the weight bearing condition, because the main important function of the foot is weight bearing. It also brings about mobility, but that is less. The aim here is more the stability. The mobility part of the foot is taken care of by the arches, as well as the arches plays a very crucial role in bringing about mobility as well as stability. In the next video, we will study about the plantar arches. Thank you guys.